Welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa. What does it take to have a maker's mindset? And how does that translate into products that customers love and pay for? That is the theme of this conversation with Manjita, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mason. Mason helps e-commerce entrepreneurs and small businesses basically customize their storefront to improve conversions. Mason recently won the Best App User Interface Award at the Shopify 2020 Commerce Awards and is growing really rapidly as well. Kos spoke about what she learned from her previous experiences of founding companies, what she's doing differently in this stint, and things like customer acquisition, onboarding, retention, and a bunch of other things. This was a fascinating conversation and one that I really, really enjoyed. I'm sure you will too, so do stick around. Hi, Kos. Welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
I'm so excited to finally meet you and put a face to the name.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. I thought a good place to start would be your description. You call yourself a maker, and in the creative economy that we live in, right? I know that word has a specific meaning to it, and there's a context to it, right? So I wonder if you could take us through, what is the maker's mindset like, and how is that mindset or context different from a founder's mindset or an operator's mindset?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting question to start with, right? A lot of people actually keep asking me, why do you keep saying maker philosophy, right? Like what's so great about it? What's something that really caught your eye when you read about it or met people who call themselves maker for the first time? And I think I got exposed to it quite vividly when I was spending quite a lot of time in the Silicon Valley, based out of Palo Alto, just going through the usual rounds of San Francisco to all the way down, and a lot of maker fairs were happening, and they are still happening whenever it's possible, a lot digitally now. But that was very exciting for me to see, like, what's all this maker fair, right? Like, what it reminded me, Roshan, of when we were kids and we would have our science fairs, like back in school. And I was very excited to actually go and see what's really happening there, and meeting a bunch of interesting personalities, engineers, coders, sometimes people who probably aren't anything in engineering or technology, but just craftsmen, right? And one of the common thing that I started seeing in the maker mindset was that it was a lot to do with, collaboration, a lot to do with communication. It was more, tinkering with things to solve a problem, get it out there. But there was this community, and that community feeling was extremely important in a maker. Right? And which basically means that it's not necessarily about leadership and it's not necessarily about cumulative learning, right? As a maker, you could literally be tinkering with one thing today and something else tomorrow. But it definitely is very community first. It's about, hey, as a group of people, how do we, work towards a common goal in a way, right?
Right.
And that's where actually you were saying, what's the difference between a founder and a maker, right? And that got me thinking, and I think I would think of it as like a Venn diagram, probably, because we spoke about schools. So two big circles, maker and founders, they overlap. And I think the overlapping section in the middle is the operator. I think that's how it goes. You could be a founder, you might not be an operator. You can be a maker, you might not be a founder, right? And you don't have to be, because it doesn't have to do with leadership. It doesn't have to do with accumulation. But the minute you intersect them both, then there's the operator in the middle, and that operator has to lead. That operator has to have cumulative knowledge. So it's, I learned from my past mistakes, or I'd learned something that works, and now how do I layer on more better stuff so that I can do even better and better, right?
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting that you talk about it, right? So I always thought about it as like autonomous individuals, right? Like craftsmen, as you mentioned it. I mean, I think we're at a stage at this point of time where, plenty of conventional functions could, at least in the early stages, could be automated away, right? Do you really
Hmm.
need an accountant? Do you really need an HR in the beginning? Do you really need some of these other things, right? And there are people, whose temperament it is, who would much rather work unto themselves and maybe surround themselves with similar folks, right? Rather than build
Yeah.
a conventional company in terms of, okay, you have an HR team, you have a marketing team, you
Yeah.
have a product team, and so on and so forth. And just simply the way, like if I look at your skill set, right, it's sort of like an overlap between product and marketing, right? So you've been a product person, and then you're big on content marketing, so on and so forth, that we'll talk about, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an individual who's full stack unto themselves, right? And you're really like sort of surrounding yourselves with people similar to you. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think as a maker, again, you don't necessarily have to.
Mm.
But as a founder operator, you got to, right?
Yeah.
Because you might be a maker, and you might be, for example, in one of the biggest maker fairs in the Valley, which was sponsored by Google. You'll find a lot of robotics enthusiasts, right?
Mm.
And they are there. They are absolutely almost full stack, like they can build robots out of scratch and all of it. But they're not. That's not what they're thinking of go to market,
Mm.
right? So they're not thinking, how do I take it to market, and what it takes to actually build a team around to actually grow that into a business, or how do I
Mm.
take it, how do consumers react to it, how do I go and find that out and iterate and make that whatever robotic solution I'm building better. So as a maker, you might sometimes, a lot of times, be limited or limiting, I think limiting is the wrong word. It would be your purview ends by just the act of making things and collaborating with others to make it. But you are not going to necessarily be full stack in the perspective of, hey, go to market, customer
Yeah.
feedback,
Yeah.
growth. Yeah. So that's where the sort of boundaries lie.
Right. So like a founder minus the company building, if you can put it that way, right? Right.
I would say, yeah, maybe a founder minus the company building, but all founders are not necessarily makers either,
Yeah.
because you might not be very handsy, right? You might not
Correct.
actually be very
Correct.
hands-on and doing stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was an interesting start to the conversation. And now to lend some more context to everyone who's listening in terms of what you do and really what occupies your mind space on a daily basis, let's talk about Mason, right? And you've had
Mm-hmm.
an interesting journey leading up to Mason as well. So I was just looking at, your profile, and it's store.io to Kubric. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And then to Mason. So describe that journey, what led you to where you are right now, and talk about a few of
Yeah.
the milestones that, you've experienced along the way.
No, absolutely. When I started out Storio, it was as a first-time founder. Before that, Roshan, back in college or out of college, you always have this dream, right? Like, I want to do something of my own. So I had my own food blog. I had a lot of, and that again will tie back to the content part and marketing part that you mentioned. We'll get there. So I had a food blog. It had quite a good fair amount, 5,000 hits a month, which was very good for me. I was very excited about it. And then I think that was the phase when I was a maker, because I killed it, right? And I wasn't thinking about how to grow it or anything of that sort. And then I tried to dabble in a jewelry subscription sort of a business. And I started out on Facebook and would sell it to get great looking jewelry from source. My sister was in China at that point. So from Shanghai, from Xi'an, would get in great jewelry, pack it up, great collection, and subscribe, right? Again, I think the maker mindset over a founder's mindset, and that also died very easily. And so I think for me, even though I dabbled in making things before, for me, Storio was the first time when I was actually a founder operator. And a lot of learning I can't even imagine, right? I was in Mintra just before that. I was a product manager there, leading the content technology business, in fact. And right out of there, jumped out from the cocoon of always having worked and having dabbled in making many things, but not really growing anything, right? And jumping into Storio, a couple of milestones there. Learned a lot from the YC team on why Storio will not work. So that was an eye-opening moment. And I think a lot of humility, learning a lot of humility along with it, right? That it's all about growth, learning, your own personal growth. And so how do you not tie your success or your traditional definition of success, I would say, to something that's happening in your startup? Hard, but yeah, had to go through that. So I think the milestone for me in the days of Storio, which was a podcasting startup, by the way. I know Roshan's like, for the listeners, Roshan's eyes are lighting up right now.
Of course. No, I knew it had something to do with audio, but I didn't quite realize it was a podcast startup as such.
Yeah, so we were building out like a podcasting, network of regional podcasters, and we had like 400 strong network by the time we closed it. A lot of regional podcasters who were ex-radio guys, possibly, right? And in Chennai we had meetups. In Bengal we had meetups of Storio podcasters who were podcasting in their local language. But of course, we were pretty early, and I think we chewed on a really large problem. Like, our perspective of how to solve it is, let's build a platform, right? And that was definitely not the right perspective. And I think YC taught us that. And, as I said, a lot of humility there.
Right. So what was it about? I mean, it was getting all these podcasters on a common platform, and I presume maybe connecting them with the marketing folks or brands and so on. Was that it?
Absolutely nailed it, right? So connecting with like Bloomberg Quint or Swarajya or some large publication on the other hand, and also providing their own kind of like a Patreon page, right? Where they can share their profile, they can earn out of it. They can actually do microtransactions on short stories like a storefront. Absolutely. Like a storefront for their stories, and where they could also interestingly microtransact and people could buy. So one of the interesting things we did over there was during Valentine's Day, a bunch of these people actually recorded love stories, packaged it into little love story audio gifts, and we saw a lot of traction. For us, that was so exciting. But it was it was a little too early, 2017, a little too early in India to get started on podcasting. And secondly, I think that is the learning that we will continue to speak about for the rest of the conversation, is that, hey, don't tackle too big, tackle narrow and start with a sharp point. And I think that was the learning from Storio.
This episode is brought to you by Mulya. You want to move fast? Sure. But without breaking things? Now that's a hard ask. The thing is, once you have some base of users and customers, you just cannot afford to risk quality. So how do the likes of Cred, Swiggy and Curefit, some of India's fastest growing startups, ship at lightning pace and delight their users and customers? Simple, they're working with Mulya as a strategic quality partner. Mulya is India's most talented and passionate community of testers. They've helped prevent thousands of bugs and regression issues. So as a CTO or a product owner, if you want to reduce tech debt, especially while you scale, do check out Mulya.com. I've interviewed Mulya's founder and CEO Pradeep on the podcast earlier, and we spoke about how startups can improve quality while scaling and things to that effect. You should definitely check it out. I'll link to it in the description below. Now back to your regular programming. Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? I mean, you brought up the YC experience. I want to delve a little bit on that. So what did the YC experience teach you? I mean, what was the feedback that you got? And if you could also talk about these lessons that you mentioned, right? Specifically from this experience. And then after that, we could move on to Kubric and Mason. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I'll just encapsulate it in one sharp experience because for me, looking back, that is probably the biggest takeaway. So that's like the thing that sticks a lot is one fine day, one of the mentors was asking me actually that, hey, what do you think you're building, right? And I had this entire story. It's a platform, two-sided, people connecting, blah 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 blah. And then what benefit would they get out of it was his next question. And then again, it's like, oh yeah, you can sell it, you can do this, you can do that. And interestingly, he said that, so who is, what do people want? What do people who you want, how does your platform become successful when people listen, right? And what do those listeners want? Right? And to be very honest, we didn't have an answer for it, because it was like, oh, people maybe like stories, oh, people also like nonfiction. When do they listen? They can listen when they are on the road, they can listen. So everything that, he kept asking me, the answers was more about what people could do, but we had a lack of clarity of what people want to do. Right? And I think that was pretty much the lesson, right? Like this constant questioning yourself in a way, right? What do people want to do, and what do people need, right? Because there's a lot of things they can, and surely it would help us and help them if they do end up doing all of that. But right now, what do they want?
Right. It's an interesting thing, right? Because I was having a similar conversation this week as well with someone who's building, who's solving a problem for a very specific user persona. But then in our conversation, I mean, it felt like you were solving for their day in their life. I mean, their entire 360, right? And simply from experience, I was of the opinion that you should perhaps like have a tip of the spear. I mean, you should have one thing that you do really well and then build upon all of the rest of the stuff, because otherwise your value proposition gets diluted into, and this happens in enterprise SaaS a lot of times, not enterprise, but, SaaS generally, where you end up building, verticalized productivity tools in some sense, right? So productivity for different sorts of people, because the base layer of features and everything is pretty much the same, whether it's like tasks or notes or all of those workflows and whatnot, right? And they're adding like function specific stuff and solving that one specific thing that really matters becomes like, I think the useful first thing that you have to kind of do. And
I guess so. I guess so. Because at the end of the day, like, think of yourself, right? If someone comes and tells you, hey, Roshan, we have another very awesome podcasting platform, right? I think you're going to say, like, what do you add to my day today that I don't already do, right? And that's where maybe the biggest problem is that, hey, I just want a place for me to do audio video recording, and it gets auto edited. I'm just giving a random example. But what does Roshan want?
No, exactly. And that's a damn good example, right? Because people often like pitch me, platforms and say that, hey, you know what, we're going to take care of all of your podcasting needs, right? But really, I mean, I'm so reluctant to move because there isn't one thing that's like a burning need for me at this point of time to move out of, stuff that I'm using, And if I look at the decisions I made in terms of why I chose to have like Zoom for recording, for instance, or Anchor for, distribution, or something else for editing and so on. I mean, it's that they did that one thing really, really well, right? Arguably, Zoom is the most low-tech recording or podcasting tool possible, right? I mean, you can do only one thing in this, but it does that so damn well that I wouldn't really want to like move to another one that offers four other things that, may somewhat do an okay job of the stuff that we're talking about, like, which is the recording. Yeah.
And for you, you are the host, so your interviewee is also important for you, right?
Absolutely.
So if I don't have access to Zoom, if I can't access the products and the tools that you're using, it's meaningless for you, right? So I think that's where a lot of us product creators end up failing a lot of times, is because we don't have the view of what's important for you. For you, what is important is me, right? At this moment, you want to make sure that I have the right setup with the minimal friction for you to get the maximum bang of
damn good point. Yeah, damn good point. Because oftentimes we're like, as creators, I mean, I guess you're blinded by the fact that your product is so awesome. You forget to like, understand that it has to play well with an ecosystem of things that people might perhaps be using, right? I mean, so maybe integrations on those front and so on would make it a lot more seamless. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if I were to send some Zoom link versus, some link which I have to like write a paragraph of text to explain it, and then, hope like hell that the person doesn't encounter a problem and so on and so forth, right? I mean, it's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
So from Store.io, you moved on to Kubric, and what was that journey like? So you decided all of these things, I mean, you had all of these lessons, and then what did you do differently at Kubric?
I wish it was as neat and clean as I'm making it out to be. Because honestly speaking, and that's my learning, and I think I'll speak about it before we close. But it felt at that point not like such a clear demarcation, to be honest, Roshan, because it was just like, hey, this is dying out, and I'm hearing some other signals, and I'm jumping right back in, right? So I didn't. In retrospect, maybe I think I could have taken a couple of months off and actually assimilated a lot of my learning. It might have helped to not make some of the other things that we could have done better at Kubric. I don't think we were very wrong or very making too many mistakes in terms of product building, in terms of go-to-market, etc., while doing Kubric. But there were lessons in, I think, leadership. There were lessons in team building. There were lessons in go-to-market that we did not spend the time, or I personally did not spend the time to step back and kind of assimilate, right? So even though being a, as you were saying, being a maker and a tinkerer and a product manager, the product lessons are the easiest to assimilate, and they're like, oh, you soak it in and you're walking out, right? But the next step after that, hey, there were also other lessons about go-to-market. There were lessons about growth, and I don't think I took that space to assimilate all of that.
Right. No, there's that adage I'm reminded of, right? They say first time founders think about product and second time founders think about distribution. So
Absolutely. And that has become like a thing now, that what is distribution? I think we just keep, you're so right. I'm literally like going to cry right now because we can end the conversation. That's it. That's the mic drop moment of the day.
No, believe me. I mean, I've been through that journey of like, being in a cocoon and sort of building and building and building, and then, being hit by that thunderbolt of, hey, but why isn't anyone downloading this app, right? Or why isn't anyone using it, or much less, paying for it? So, yeah. So what led you to Mason then? I mean, Kubric and Mason, and, what is Mason for, those who are listening?
Absolutely. So I'll start with what is Mason, and then move on to like what we did with Kubric and how that, in a way, interestingly moved on to Mason. Mason is a no-code store merchandising toolkit for small businesses and entrepreneurs who want to start their online store, and who probably already started their online store, right? So if you look at, anybody who's come online and has set up their D2C brand or e-commerce marketplace today, it's definitely getting so much easier with amazing, products like Shopify, Wix, and all of that. And I've worked in supply chain, right? I've built OMS, WMS, all of those stuff. So I understand how complex your inventory, pricing, order, procurement, all of those systems can be. That's all abstracted into this extremely easy self-serve toolkit called, for example, a Shopify, right? And so it simplifies this no-code, in a way, technology of Shopify simplified users coming online and setting up their own stores. But now the problem's moved on to, how do I manage my store every day, right? Because the question now comes is that, hey, I have my store, and now what? Like, almost like it reminds me of this Finding Nemo, one of my favorite movies, and in which all the little fish, they sort of figure out a way to get out of the aquarium. They're still in the plastic bags, and they jump out into the sea, and they're like looking at each other. All of them are still in plastic bags, and they're like, now what, right? And it literally is like that when you speak to SMBs and entrepreneurs who are setting up their online stores. They probably get help from someone, set up a web store, their wireframe of their website is done, they have some presence on Instagram, they probably even have a WhatsApp number where people get place orders. And then the question comes, now what? Because running your store every day is not as simple as, here's my catalog, right? You have to make sure your pricing is, and your inventory is updated in all these places at the right time. You have to launch new products. You have to make sure that your store funnel is optimized, right? So what we help with Mason is it's a no-code platform, so you don't have to know how to code and all of that. But you can literally, like in one click, connect your Shopify back into it. and your front end to it, of course. And then it helps you manage your day-to-day store operations very easily.
So this is stuff like order management, for instance, or it's more stuff on the marketing side as well, like sending
Yeah.
out promos and stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is more for your store, you're inside your store, right? So if you
Okay.
look at even a store, it's got a funnel within it, and marketing is like the easy answer, which is, hey, like, let's send out some ads on,
Got it.
Google or Facebook. But once people land on your homepage, that's
Yeah.
where you have the heaviest intent, right? And you want to
Yeah.
make sure that they are now jumping from the home page to your product list page, to your product details page, and adding all that products to the to the cart and buying them, right? So across this funnel itself, there's a lot of information that you want to surface to them at the right time.
Right.
For example, on the homepage, you want to maybe call out the best selling products, right? Because you want people to understand that, hey, these are like the top selling in this category. And if I click on one of those products, then in the product details page, you might want to say that, hey, like, this has a high battery life, or this is like, resistant to babies throwing it on the floor, right? So there's like all these things that you want to call out about your product inside the store funnel. And so a product like Mason actually helps you manage that flow.
Right. So if I understood correctly, it's like, okay, you've built a storefront, right? And then you've done the campaigns. Now these people are finally at your store. What do you do, right? Basically, how do you convert these people? How do you retain them? And perhaps, thereafter, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So right now we are focused only inside the store. So it's more helping your team, helping your shoppers funnel from the home page with the right call outs, as I was explaining, like the bestsellers and all of that on the home page, to actually going on to your details pages where you want to call out like visually the best attributes about your product and converting. But of course, over time, it can also help out like your loyalty and retention and all of that thing. But we don't do that today.
So a couple of things related to what you said, right? What you described sounds like, it sounds like an important thing, but it also seems like a very horizontal thing, right? I mean, literally every store must be facing this kind of a challenge and must want to use your product, right? And B, it also seems like they may not fully know how to articulate this, right? This thing that you're talking about, right? So my question is like, how do you figure out like who your buyer persona is, like who do you have to go after first, then next, and then after that, right? And yeah, I mean, maybe we could talk about that and I could get to the second bit afterwards.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it, right? This flow that I mentioned has a lot of use cases, right? Like, for example, I'm running a sale. I'm launching a new product, and I'm talking about like a e-commerce store, an e-commerce merchant. So he will have his own 5 or 6 things that he wants to do on a day-to-day. Like, I want to make sure all my products are up to date. I want to make sure my old inventory is not just lying there. I want to sell it, right? I want to make sure that I have a sale. I have a good sale happening over the weekend, right? I want to make sure that I have 5 products in my hand and I want to, launch them on my store, right? So what we did is that all of these use cases are too many. Let's narrow it down even further as a starting point to just how to run your sale, right? And even within running your sale, we narrowed it down to even further and saying that, hey, running your sale needs your discounting to be automated, right? So as you can see, I think the earlier version of me would be like, hey, this is what we do end to end, and then my go-to-market would end there. But for us now, the learning has been, no, now what's the double click on it, which is the most pertinent use case. That's like every D2C brand is running sale every Saturday, Sunday. I'm sure you would have seen on Instagram, right? And then within that, when you're running a sale, what do you need the most? You need your discounts to be highlighted the most, right? So that's how we narrow down our go-to-market to honestly just start with that.
Right. Now, again, what you just described sounds like something unique, right? And there is this, it's sort of a double-edged thing, right? When you are early to a particular market or when you're just about building a category, right? In fact, I mean, I think it's like kind of stacked against you, which is that people, A, might need to be educated about the problem itself, right? And B, they may not specifically be looking at this particular thing that you're, actually selling. And C, it might come off as a nice to have, right? When you're early in the curve, when you may not really understand, there is no precedence of that value being delivered. Either you have not experienced it or, you don't know maybe one or two others who have experienced it within your network. right?
Yeah.
So a lot of this early adoption and like, being early in the category, how are you thinking about some of these things?
Yeah, I think the expanded version of what we do, which is, hey, we help you merchandise your whole store. That is definitely, something that people don't think about off the cuff of their, sleeve today. But the thing about, as a brand, I want to run a sale this weekend at 50% discount. I mean, everybody
Mm.
does that. Like,
Mm.
that's not something I have to teach anyone, right?
Mm.
Even people who don't understand or even don't want to sell anything online understand that, hey, like online mein to wahi hota hai. You have
Right.
sales running. Like my mom
Right.
says, right? Like
Right.
the minute she wants to buy something, she's like, check online, no? It might be cheaper.
Right. Right.
So I think like that is so ingrained globally, by the way. This is not just India.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world, you will run sales. And that is something the minute you choose, let's say tomorrow Roshan says that, hey, I want to, write a book and I want to actually, market a set of like mini series about all these podcasts. I want to convert it into ebooks and I want to sell it. One of the things you're gonna do every time there is a Diwali or there is a New Year's or there is a Valentine's Day, that you're gonna sort of do a sale, right? So
Right.
that is something that we realized is very fundamental about e-commerce. You run sales.
So if I understand if I understand correctly, I mean, this is damn good, right? So which is that you find the closest proxy to whatever you're trying to solve for, like the biggest proxy that you can find, right? I mean, um, yeah. So
You
that's
nailed it,
interesting.
actually. Yeah, you
Yeah.
nailed it, actually. It's
Right.
like, there is a new space. There are many things that can be done
Yeah.
there. But, there is that one thing that is very fundamental.
Yeah.
And it's almost it is in your space, but people don't assume it to be that. So you don't
Right.
have to educate them. You
Right.
know that in e-commerce, sabko sale run karna hai. So you sort of,
Right.
start with that.
Right.
But yeah, to double click on the second part of your question, we haven't really done any education or anything around it as yet, because right now we are pretty much word of mouth, and again, we are in the Shopify ecosystem, so there is naturally a little bit of word of mouth within that ecosystem. So we've primarily been very just product first and product led growth first right now, without the
Right.
trappings of marketing or content.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So let's move along this axis, right? I mean, you've kind of narrowed down as to, who would be relevant for you. So how does customer acquisition work today? I mean, it kind of seems like, there are so many solutions for e-commerce, right? I mean,
Yeah.
with helping, people sell products online and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Call it creator tools, if you will, right? So
absolutely.
how do you stand out, and how does this customer acquisition that engine work for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, early days, it has, no matter how best a narrow segment you have found, there will always be someone. And by
Yeah.
the way, if there is no competitor in it, then you
Yeah.
should actually be a little scared.
Yeah.
My learning again, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you know that,
Yeah.
you should be a little scared. And so, yeah, there are so many teams that say they help, with sales, right? Like we help you run your sale. But I think our sweet spot became a segment of users, which is like your first time coming online kind of people, right? And for them, like most of these, we want to help you run your sales. If you look at like e-commerce tech out there, they're all very expensive products, right? So for us, the way to at least get the initial visibility was that, hey, this is almost like this is a self-serve, a very simple tool that you can use, and you don't have to know how to code to use it. That was also very easy for people to even think of. And yeah, you are a new business, so it's not expensive. Just get started with it. And then we thought we'll expand out. So for us, like that, almost changing it, because in e-commerce usually people are all running after the large guys. They're the ones with the deep pockets. So all the retail and e-commerce tech would actually be there. So for us, helping out the young team or the individual who's come online sort of helped.
Right. And any particular channels that are working well for you? I mean, I assume that you're running a bunch of ads, and also you're doing a fair bit of content marketing and so on. Anything that's working really, really well for you, and something you could share on that front?
I think content marketing, like I would, 3 years back, if someone told me content marketing, and I would say, everybody says content marketing works, big deal, but it works.
Yeah.
So you can't really, kind of run away from it. Content marketing does work. I think content in general works, and honest content does work. And if people find resonance, and if people feel connected to the content, then it will work, right? And that has, that has rewards over time for a long time. And even if you put in short terms, of course, paid marketing, etc., might work out, but longer term, I think nothing beats like having good content out there. And that's why there's so much of content too now, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually been my observation as well, right? With lower ticket sizes, I feel like, especially if you're selling in the SMB segment or whatever, then your content can be, any piece of content could be at once top of the funnel or middle of the funnel or bottom of the funnel even, right? Because you're addressing something that depends on someone's need specifically, right? So with your first few users and customers, how are you onboarding these people, and any thoughts on making that more seamless and friction free and so on?
Yeah, we are learning too. And I think there's so much great content by amazing people like Ramli, John, who have done tons of analysis on different onboarding flows and have broken it down and have said that, hey, there are like, for example, just 2 or 3 weeks back, I didn't know before that there are actually 7 or 8 kinds of onboarding flows, right? Like coach screens and, a gamified onboarding and intent-based on, I had no clue. I didn't know that they had names for it, right? So there's a lot of learning over there. We are still learning. And another big learning over here, actually, Roshan, is that the onboarding that you choose really depends on who's your segment. So there's no one size fits all onboarding flow. If, for example, a Roshan decides to use, you're a tech savvy guy, like your onboarding flow can't be like, hey, I'll guide you through step by step till you're going to skip. Right. Whereas if you're going for a very first time online, or I don't know how to use complex tools kind of people, then you might, actually that might be the deal maker, right? So it really means that you got to understand your customer on the other side before you choose the kind of onboarding that works for them.
Right. And once these people are onboarded, do you identify like certain points of delight where and the team knows that what this guy is going to be here for a while, right? I mean, this is integral to him or her, right? And now we have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, you start, again, we are just 12 months old, so there's a lot of information that we are also learning along the way, specifically for this product. But yeah, in theory, you do have these moments of delight, and once you capture the moments of delight, I think in practice, what I've seen is that that learning also evolves because 12 months, right? Like how much you can't say over 3 years, this is the best. Like I think we'll have that. So again, stepping back, my understanding over here is that right now, yes, there are some moments of delight, but I do know that over the next 6 months, we might actually be able to enhance and our own understanding of where it stands. But in theory, yes, it's very, very important to identify those.
Yeah. No, I think along the journey, you keep revisiting all of these sort of hypotheses and then validating it, right? I mean, I think it's like a continuous cycle. It never stops, really. I mean, whether you're a year old or 3 years or, perhaps 10 years old, I mean, you keep discovering things and you keep getting proven right and wrong. Sometimes, annoyingly so, frustratingly so, but yeah, I mean, that's the journey, I suppose, right?
You have to, yeah. Otherwise, you're dead.
Of course. So the other nuance with Mason itself is that you're tightly integrated with the Shopify ecosystem, right? What is that like? I mean, what are some of the opportunities and what are some of the challenges of working within this Shopify ecosystem?
I mean, the challenge is very clear, right? You are just in one ecosystem, and e-commerce is way bigger than that. Right. And there are so many people who, and specifically as an Indian team, right? Like India is not Shopify first. That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much of opportunity outside of it that we are, not even looking at if we are only tightly integrated into one ecosystem, right? The positive is that yes, in the early days, you get a lot of tech savvy sort of adopters, so they can give you great feedback. You can iterate faster, maybe. But end of the day, I mean, it's a good to have, but if you're only focused on that for the rest of your life, I think you might miss out on very interesting problems that you can solve for others too. So I think to answer, summarize what you were asking, the positive is that it can help you in the early days to get great feedback from people who have used a lot of technology. It, because it's so tightly coupled, and you're being an India is not Shopify first, so do miss out on a lot of knowledge of other teams, and a lot of people who are coming online and setting up stores and who don't even know what Shopify is.
Right. I think at this point is perhaps prudent to mention here that Mason perhaps won the Shopify Commerce Award, right, for best app user interface. So
Yes, we did.
yeah, that's amazing. So, you mentioned India, right? But then often, like we see that these tools and applications, I mean, you can be global, right? I mean, obviously the Shopify community, as you mentioned, is still a little early in India, perhaps not as mature as, let's say, Canada or North America and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, do you really are you really geo focused at this point of time, or you're global first?
No, we're global first for sure. And we do have I think about 80% of our users would be global, rather
Okay.
than only in APAC, in fact. But the reason I mentioned that is because it's also, as a founder or rather as a founder operator, it's also always important, and which I'm learning, is to how to balance the zoom in and zoom out also to look at what's happening in the ecosystem, right? So one of the things about, yes, right now it doesn't matter, but you have to zoom out and also be able to see that, hey, because of this, what are the learnings that you're probably missing out on, and what are the things that are happening in those spaces, so that you are aware, and you can take, you don't want to wake up 1 year later and say that, oh, I didn't even think about it, right? So I think it's more that. Yeah.
I think these are the traits of serial entrepreneurs, right? I mean, I see very clearly that, I mean, because as first time entrepreneurs, this is a classic mistake, right? I mean, you're so busy solving the problem that you don't abstract out of it and see the larger picture of it, that, whatever you're doing, is it even worth it, or could something else outside of your scope of view matter and change your destiny, right? So,
Yeah.
um, speaking of, as a founder at this point of time, what are some of the high level challenges that you're trying to solve for, along, let's say, product or marketing, or even your the future of the company itself in terms of strategy and so on?
Yeah, I always dread that question because I think, like, if you want another 45 minutes, we can go over there. And I don't want to be, why high level? Let's go in. But okay, jokes apart, I think the first thing for me is actually not about marketing and product and all of that, but it's actually about what we just spoke, which is that sometimes it's important not to operate. Sometimes it's very, very important to step back and to look around, right? And also just spend, even if it's 5 minutes, just look back at your own 2 months and see, like, what happened, right? Put it down on a piece of paper, write it down if that helps. For me, blogging is helping. I'm realizing that, so I'm starting to do a lot more about writing out or just talking about it. It helps. But putting that learning in structure, I think it's so important. And for that, it's important to not operate. So I think one of the most important, or rather, I've used important like 7 times in the last 1 minute, but one of the biggest challenge for me is sometimes how to not operate and actually step back and learn from my own work that I have done over the last few months, right? So that's the biggest challenge I'm trying to solve as a founder, because it's so easy to just jump into the weeds and keep operating and not stepping out. But the difference between just a plain operator and a founder operator is that, right? You've got to be able to step back and look at the big picture.
Right.
So that's the first thing.
Right. Sorry, you were saying?
That's the first thing.
Okay.
And I think the second thing that we are, trying to set up as a team is that we now have a few people who are also not in India based, so not in the same time zone. I mean, I used to work in MNCs before all of this. So, I've worked in IBM Labs and NCR Corp. So I have the experience in large companies of working across time zones, but in a very small setup where everybody is so tightly integrated, right? And everybody is operator. So there the dependencies are so much higher. So I think just learning that balance between remote hires, international hires, and local and different time zones, and how to still keep everybody on the same page.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think writing is such a powerful tool, right, in some sense, because I think many times I think of it as thinking itself, because you're able to articulate whatever is spinning in your head and put it on a page, right? And then you're able to look at it and deliberate about it. And I was having this conversation with my team as well on the importance of doing retrospectives, right? Because you finish a project, you're just in such a hurry to move on to the next one and the next one, and you're just ambling along, right? You're carrying all of this load and baggage of all of the bad decisions you made, and perhaps not even realizing that it's kind of weighing you down along the way. So I would highly recommend those kind of retrospectives and stuff as well. I think if you do it often enough, you could get like superpowers as a team, I would say.
Yeah. No, I think we don't do enough, and I'm going to definitely, I love what you're saying, which is also encouraging the team to do more of retrospection and writing. I think I'm definitely going to take that as a takeaway, and and then say that Roshan told me, guys, it's not my fault.
So, this has been a fascinating conversation, plenty of different insights around building, making, selling, and things to that effect, right? So if there are founders or operators or so on listening to this podcast, right, what is the one thing they should know about what you're doing and where you're operating that may not seem like it from the outside, but something that is a secret to you per se, because of having operated in that space?
Yeah, actually, I think one interesting learning of working in the SMB space, I would say, of helping out individual solopreneurs, right, is that the simpler you make things, it just reduces, and it's such a, when you think about it, it's like, of course it does, right? Make it simple, they'll use it more, clear.
Right.
But it's not, because simple for you is not simple for them.
Yeah.
Right. And that questioning yourself or questioning your own team's judgment on what is simple, right? And constantly, I cannot overemphasize on user conversations, and I cannot overemphasize on constantly bugging the hell out of them if needed, but getting their feedback. People tend to give feedback if you're persistent enough. But oh my God, that helps so much. And it's not something that's possible, I understand, in the B2C space, because there's just too many people, right? So it might be like really hard, but people who are in B2B and who are helping small teams, you still get a chance to go out and speak to them, be them for a day. So I think that's very important. And it sounds very, very, of course, we all should do that. But I've seen it. We don't do it enough.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, I would highly recommend that as well. Finally, before you leave us, what are some of the plans for the future? And, where should people find you online? And, what should people do?
Oh yeah, for me, I'm pretty much the spokesperson for what we're doing right now. So very easy to find on LinkedIn. It's KAUS cost. So you just type in there. I think you'll pretty much get one person in the list, and that's me. Find me there and engage with me. I love talking to people, getting to know. I think that's pretty much all I do nowadays, which is meet people and get to know them, get to know their perspective, hit me up. But more importantly, I think if you're very, very interested in also kind of empowering small businesses across the world to kind of like have an Amazon-like storefront at their fingertips, well, come and work with us. And I'm sure if you love that problem, if you think that why just Amazon, everybody else should have democratic technology, you are speaking to the right people, right? So join us if you want democracy out there in tech.
Perfect. That's a wonderful note to end the podcast on. Thank you so much for being on the podcast again, Kaus. It was super talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, then don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite platform and share this episode with all of your fellow startup operators. Also, follow the Startup Operator on LinkedIn and Twitter for more updates. Stay safe, take care, and see you soon on a brand new episode of the Startup Operator.